أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب وأخر متشابهات فأما الذين في قلوبهم زيغ فيتبعون ما تشابه منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء تأويله وما يعلم تأويله إلا الله والراسخون في العلم يقولون آمنا به كل من عند ربنا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا إنك جامع الناس ليوم لا ريب فيه إن الله لا يخلف الميعاد. Kitab is mentioned in the beginning of this verse, qualifying the quality of al-muhkamat. Some verses of the Holy Quran are referred to as muhkamat, and the quality of muhkamat is further explained and further qualified by this word, Ummul Kitab. In another place, the Holy Quran further explains this word, Kitab, so that the muhkamat can also be better understood in the light of the Holy Quran's own explanation of the word Kitab. It says, Yamhullahu ma yasha'u wa yusbitu wa indahu Kitab. That Allah effaces or obliterates whatever He likes, وَيُثْبِتُ, and keeps certain things. وَعِنْدَهُ الْكِتَابِ, and with Him is the mother of all teachings or commandments, the source of all commandments. So here, by understanding the word Kitab better in the light of this verse, we can understand the role of muhkamat in the Holy Quran and also in other earlier books wherever the muhkamat appeared in the earlier books. Now this verse also has a similarity with with another verse which discusses the same subject in another manner, and this similarity automatically comes to one's mind, and because it will further explain this verse plus the earlier verses which I have referred, so I should quote that verse too. It says, Allahu ya'lamu ma taghidul arhamu wa ma tazdad wa kullu shay'in indahu bimiqdar. Allah knows well ma taghidul arhamu wa ma tazdad, what the uterus reduces and what it increases. So both the processes of rejecting a few things and increasing a few others or promoting a few others are related to the function of uterus. And here Kitab is described performing the same functions. So when it says Allahu yamhu or yamhullahu, and then it is followed by wa indahu Kitab, what the Holy Quran refers to is the function of the uterus with regard to the spiritual uterus. The same function which we observe in the physical uteruses, The similar function is performed in the world of spirits, in the world of religion, and the books which are Kitab, they also, in the process of development, reject some things which come into being temporarily, for a while, and then are wiped out. They perform a purpose, but that purpose is only a temporary, transient purpose. Not a permanent role is attributed to them. And some come to stay. Some forms of life, for instance. The same thing is witnessed in the process of evolution. If you study the process of evolution, you will be surprised to find that what happens in a shorter period in the uterus, if you enlarge it and present it on a much, much larger canvas of billions of years, you will see the same thing happening in the same manner in the process of life, and even earlier in the process of the universe developing to higher stages. So all this is so beautifully well connected, and it encompasses the entire phenomenon of creation and then moving it on to higher steps. What happens in that process is being described here with the mention of the word Kitab regarding the Muhkamat. Wahunna Kitab. So now in the light of this, we'll understand the function of Muhkamat much, much better. They have a very important role to play, which will be similar to what is happening in the uterus. So this is why just in the preceding verse, the Yusawwirukum fil arham, the phenomenon of how you are given different shapes in the uterus of your mothers, is mentioned. So I'll come to that later again. Now, as against this, but mutashabihat, against the muhkamat, have to be understood in this background. Unfortunately, most of the previous commentators have not specially focused their attention on this quality of the verse Kitab in relation to Al-Muhkamat. So because this has been omitted, or at least it has not played the most important role it was there to play, it was that role was not noticed particularly. So the converse that is mentioned by way of mutashabihat is also missed, and this relationship, the roles these two, muhkamat and mutashabihat, play with regards to the function of the uterus or the control of Kitab, that has been omitted previously. At least I haven't seen any mention of this very important relationship between the two in the previous commentaries. So, when we turn to the Holy Quran for further explanation of the word mutashabihat, not in the same tone as they are difficult to understand or they are, God forbid, of a lower quality and this and that, but in their relation to, they're playing a very important role in the uterus. What that role is, and is it a secondary function or it is also a very important function? When we turn to the Holy Quran for such an explanation, we find one in Surah Zumar in verse 24, which says, Allahu nazzala ahsan al-hadith kitaban mutashabihan mathani takhsha'irru minhu juludul lazina yakhshawna rabbahum thumma talinu juluduhum wa qulubuhum ila dhikrillah dhalika hudallahi yahdi bihi man yasha wa man yudlilillahu fama lahu min had. Allah has sent down the best discourse, a book whose verses are mutually supporting or similar to each other, and repeated in diverse forms, the skins of those who fear their Lord, do creep at its recital, then their skins and their hearts soften to the remembrance of Allah. Such is the guidance of Allah. He guides therewith whom He pleases. And he whom Allah adjudges astray, he shall have no guide. Now, in the light of this verse, mutashabihat appear to be a completely different thing from one which has been presented to us by some scholars of Islam, unfortunately. You know, they have always been mentioned in a sort of confused manner, and a role of confusion is also attributed to them as if they cause confusion. And sometimes they are mentioned as incomprehensible. Nobody knows the meaning. What are they doing in the Holy Quran if they are incomprehensible? And if you agree with most of what has been said about the mutashabihat, then most of the Holy Quran has to be relegated to not only a second-rate but a third-rate teachings, which is obviously a blemish which cannot be attributed to the Holy Quran by any means. It's the most beautiful book. So, this verse and the verse which I quoted earlier about the book, the entire book being muhkamat, and this, here in this verse is mentioned that the entire book is also is mutashabihat. So that means we have to judge this book from two various angles. From one angle, it will appear to be a book of muhkamat, and from another angle, it will appear to be a book of mutashabihat. And when you look at the mutashabihat, then you observe the extreme beauty of this book, because it says, Ahsan al-Hadith kitaban mutashabihan. The extreme excellence and the beauty of this book is rooted in its being mutashabiha. How it happens, how mutashabihat add beauty, and what role do they play in this book can be better understood if we refer to the word Ummul Kitab and its function regarding the creation and promotion of life, and setting it on to the march forward to higher degrees and higher stages. Now what happens in the uterus is that you find a basic structure which is muhkamat, and that basic structure is imprinted deep into each cell of life as a sort of blueprint. And there are billions of coded messages in that blueprint. That is Ummul Kitab, which is referred here. For each design, each creation of Allah, there is a blueprint. And that blueprint, although happens to stand in the beginning, yet it portrays what is to become in the end. It occupies the position of kun, yet portrays yakuno, what it would ultimately be. And in between, there are stages of development where you find mutashabihat. And these mutashabihat are highly essential for giving for the development of these muhkamat and turning them into the final illustration in the material world, so to say, in the form of visible existence, what was invisibly and minutely printed in the blueprint previously. So Ummul Kitab has this role to play, and in the Ummul Kitab, muhkamat are the first, they are mentioned as the blueprint of the entire teachings and the entire book. These blueprints are sometimes so finely concentrated and so minutely packed that it is impossible for a person to see them without a microscope as if, but that microscope is only provided to those who get their absar, their sight from God. That is the microscope of the holy people. But you can't always observe everything of the life through the microscopes. Temporarily, to find what is happening within on a smaller scale, you have access to microscopes. But most often, a thing has to develop to a visible size. So all the Kitab, which is mentioned here in this verse, Yamhullahu ma yasha wa yusbitu wa indahu Kitab, refers to the design which is imprinted in those cells of life which are responsible for giving birth to the fetus and its final development. And when you match what was at the beginning with the finished product, that is the child, then you will see that the child is exact copy of the blueprint enlarged to a very, very great degree. You won't find anything in the first blueprint which we will not observe in the finished copy of that blueprint in existence, in visible existence, that is the child when it is born. Every detail, every minute thing which is imprinted so minutely, invisibly in the blueprint appears in the form of a child. And the child can be concentrated into that micro existence, that is the existence of the sperm of life. So, Kitab may mean the whole process happening in the uterus, and it may mean the first blueprint. And Muhkamat also in this regard, because Muhkamat are referred to as Kitab, they would mean the initial blueprint of the plan of the teachings, whatever teachings they be called, Islam or Judaism or Christianity. That blueprint is found in the verses of Muhkamat. And when that is enlarged, the whole book becomes Muhkamat. Because everything of the first blueprint appears in the form of the whole book. This is how the whole book is also Muhkamat, and a few verses are also Muhkamat. This is why, on the authority of Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the founder of Islam, peace be upon him, Surah Al-Fatiha is Kitab. So that is the Muhkamat. One and the same thing according to the Holy Quran. So Surah Fatiha is Kitab, and the whole Quran is Kitab. And what is the difference between Surah Fatiha and the whole Kitab? The whole book is also Kitab. This is the difference. The entire child is the complete picture and enlargement of the initial blueprint, which is the And yet, that blueprint also contains everything that is possessed by the child. So in this relationship, the difference is between being very minute, qualities being very minutely packed or enlarged to a degree where they become obvious and visible. So from this angle, there is no contradiction in the Holy Quran. The whole of the Quran is Muhkamat and also a few verses, and particularly Surah Fatiha. Now, again, interestingly, the whole of the Quran is generally referred to as Mutashabihat. Almost the entire Holy Quran is referred to as Mutashabihat in some verses which I think I quoted earlier. If not, then Hadili is there. I have left those verses, but I'll bring them next time. Mutashabihat is the teaching of the Holy Quran in the sense that one verse is similar to the other, and And these similarities extend to all the verses. You can't pick out a single verse of the Holy Quran which does not have its pair and its similar verse. For instance, if there is an order about doing something, you will find that repeated in the Holy Quran in one form or the other. And also you will find mention of those people who follow that injunction of the Holy Quran and exemplify it and give an illustration in the real life. And that also is repeated. People from the time of the Holy Prophet are quoted performing the functions which they are enjoined upon to perform, and people of earlier periods are also described. And their similarities, mutashabihat, spread all over the whole of the Quran. So from this angle, the Holy Quran appears to be a book of mutashabihat. But also Surah Fatiha itself is referred to as mutashabihat, because the verse which I have just recited, Allahu nazzala ahsan al-hadith kitaban mutashabihan masaniya taqshayru minhu julud. This verse has been referred to as Surah Fatiha. And I'll quote from later on from various commentaries, as well as, most important, from Hazrat sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that Masani is Surah Fatiha. Most often repeated verses of the Holy Quran are the verses of Surah Fatiha. And they are the most beautiful too. So mutashabihan adds a quality of beauty. In what form and how it does, we'll refer to that again with reference to what is happening in the uterus. And here it says the quality of mutashabihat is so excellent and so deeply penetrating that taqshayru minhu juludul lazina yakhshawna rabbahum, that you find those people who listen to these verses, mutashabihat, their skins begin to tremble. How would you say? Taqshayru minhu julud. I'll read the recitation, the translation from Mullah Ghulam Farid. The skins of those who fear their Lord do creep at its recital. Now I wonder if the creeping is the right expression for this taqshayru minhu julud. But what happens is, what is being described is that if you are suddenly emotionally overwhelmed, then you experience a sort of trembling all over your skin. A tingling feeling runs through the entire skin, and it's a sort of ecstasy you experience. That ecstasy becomes visible in that feeling of waves after waves running over your skin, as if your skin has become the surface of an ocean which goes through turbulations. This is the picture being described by the Holy Quran in the words taqshayru minhu juludul lazina yakhshawna rabbahum thumma talinu juluduhum. Now the first emphasis in this description is on the awe they feel. These verses are awe-inspiring. The fear is not the right word in relation to this context. I shouldn't agree with this translation that by the fear, the awe of their Lord causes this creeping or tingling or wave-like motion in their skins. Because with the fear, your hearts don't melt into love. But with awe, Sometimes you're all overwhelmed with the beauty and love of the thing which has awed you too overmuch. Look at a grand sight of Himalayas sometimes, standing by the feet of the most beautiful expanse of a great mountain. The first reaction is that of awe. You're overawed. You're belittled in His presence. And then your heart is gradually filled with the beauty. And then you feel a sort of, go through a melting process of your hearts and qualities, and you become a sort of molten love, a fluid love. This is what is described in the following part of this verse. ثُمَّ تَلِينُ جُلُودُهُمْ وَقُلُوبُهُمْ إِلَىٰ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Then not only the surface of their skins goes through an experience of melting, but also this experience sinks deeper into their hearts, and then they begin to realize what is happening to them. The first expression is apparently superficial, but it's no longer superficial. It sinks into the very essence of their wisdom, that is heart. And then they love Allah and extol Allah and remember Him in a manner as ordinary people would never imagine, that this is also how Allah is loved in the deepest sense. ذَلِكَ هُدَى اللَّهِ يَهْدِي بِهِ مَن يَشَاءُ وَمَن يُضْلِلِ اللَّهُ فَمَا لَهُ مِنْ هَادٍ. This is the guidance of Allah. He provides to whomever He pleases. That is to say that those people who go through these experiences, they do it as a sign of special mercy from Allah. It can't happen to you by your own, acts of piety, so to say. You don't earn these things. They are bestowed upon you as a sign of love and dearness from Allah. وَمَنْ يُضْلِلِ اللَّهُ فَمَا لَهُ مِنْ هَادٍ. And those people who hear the same verses, they don't know what's happening. They don't even feel that, they don't even turn a hair on their skin, instead of the entire process which has been described by the Holy Quran of being operative upon them. So, mutashabiha are not something confused and, of a second or third rate in quality, but it is related to the beauty. How? Before that, I should like to remind you of a commentator of the Holy Quran who has acquired some measure of fame in the modern times, and particularly in Egypt and other countries of Arabia is becoming more and more popular and better known. And that is Maulana Abul Ala Maududi, and I don't, I say it in apostrophe Abul Ala, because otherwise it's a wrong name. Abul Ala is the name of God. Abul Ala means the father of God. So nobody can claim to be Abul Ala. One can claim, and that is what behoves everybody, to claim Abdul Ala. But anyway, this is a name, so we quote some idolaters' names in the early Islam, before the Islam, were quoted exactly as they were, without changing, as long as they remained non-Muslims. So there is no harm in quoting these names. That doesn't mean that we also, share that crime, but it only means that this is the name. So the name is Maulvi Abul Ala Maududi. In his Tafhimul Quran, he has this much to say about mutashabihat. He says that there are things, mutashabihat is translated by him as mushtabihat. There are two different words. mushtabihat and mutashabihat. Mushtabihat are those things which may be taken as similar, but generally in Arabic the connotation is inclined towards suspicious and doubtful. So shubha, that is doubt or suspicion, is derived from the same word, but sometimes there is a similarity and no doubt about things. You see the similarity, but there is no suspicion, no doubt, no confusion. So, but in mushtabeh, ishtabah, that's a different measure of Arabic from Bab-e Iftial. The word shubha generally tends to indicate a confusion out of similarities, born out of similarities. A suspicion which is wrong, born out of similarities. So when the Holy Quran refers to mutashabihat, it does not mean that. The Holy Quran is not responsible for the creation of any doubt or any suspicion. But because they are similar and because they can be translated variously, so some people who are diseased in mind according to the Holy Quran, they, instead of understanding the right message contained in those verses, distort the meaning themselves, and they are responsible. But these verses have nothing of the quality of shubha or doubt or suspicion about them. But I'm surprised how Maududi Sahib has treated this verse, indicating treated this word mutashabihat, indicating that these are the verses which may create doubts, confusions, and suspicions to a degree that, according to him, sometimes it becomes very, very dangerous to ponder over mutashabihat. His general advice is most interesting. You should share that with me. लेकिन इस ज़ुबान का ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा फ़ायदा बस इतना ही हो सकता है कि आदमी को हकीकत के करीब तक पहुँचा दे या उसका एक धुंधला सा तस्वुर पैदा कर दे. That the maximum benefit you can derive from mutashabihat is this, that you travel closer to the reality, but they don't guide you to the reality. Close, but not close enough. With the result that you create something of a confused picture of the reality is created in your mind, which is very foggy. Dhundla sa tasawwur. Something is conveyed to you which is very foggy, unclear, undefined, and that is the maximum use of mutashabihat mentioned in the Holy Quran. And now when you consider that most of the earlier scholars with whom Maulana Maududi generally agrees consider the number of mutashabihat to be overwhelming in the Holy Quran, and the number of verses which can be bracketed with the muhkamat is very little comparatively. So according to Maulana Maududi, most of the Holy Quran does not lead you or is incapable of leading you to the truth itself, but to close to the truth, all right, but to a degree that they create a very foggy and a very confusing picture of the truth. Then he says, ऐसी आयात के मफ़हूम को मुतय्यन करने की जितनी ज़्यादा कोशिश की जाएगी उतने ही ज़्यादा इश्तिबाहात और एहतमालात से साबका पेश आएगा. The more you endeavor to solve the riddle of these mutashabihat, the more you will be entrapped into confusion. And you will be led from one confusion to another. हत्ता के इंसान हकीकत से करीब तर होने की बजाय और ज़्यादा दूर होता चला जाए. इन्ना लिल्लाह. So that, however honestly you make an endeavor, instead of traveling closer to the reality and truth, by making an effort to understand mutashabihat, you will be further led astray and thrown apart, and farther from the truth will you travel. बस जो लोग तालिब हक हैं और ज़ौक़ फ़ुज़ूल नहीं रखते, वो तो मुतशाबिहात से हकीकत के उस धुंधले तसव्वुर पर करार कर लेते हैं. So those people who do not indulge in useless things and who do not have a disposition to ponder over small and significant and useless things, they keep away from this. And they say it suffice it be to us that we have got at least a foggy impression of something, and that is all. This is the scholar of Islam of the modern times, whom so many people in the Arab world and non-Arab world of Islam of today, they, almost worship. Great scholar is born, some people call him as Mujaddid of this century and this and that. And this is what he has to say about those verses about which the Holy Quran says, Allahu nazzala ahsan al-hadith kitabun mutashabiham masaniya taqshayru min julud. It is God who has revealed or caused to descend the most beautiful of narrations in the form of a book consisting of mutashabihat, which are oft repeated. So you don't have to go to another verse. This is the verse which relates the Holy Quran to be a book of mutashabihat entirely, in totality. And also, the essence of this book, that is Surah Fatiha, is also a chapter of mutashabihat. Now, this concept of Maududi Sahib is given a lie by the very first verse of this surah, which says, Nazzala alaykal kitaba bil haqqi. God says that the entire book is based on truth. And clear truth, nothing but the truth. And according to Maududi Sahib, the major part of this book, which has been revealed with truth and nothing but the truth, and evident truth, al-haq is so open truth, like sun appearing, consists of, in most cases, such verses which don't lead you to the truth, but lead you towards it a few steps, and then you can see the truth in a very confused manner as through a veil of fog. But more you travel towards it, he reminds you, warns you. Instead of going forward, you will be walking backwards. His concept of the Holy Quran and traveling into the Holy Quran is similar more to the story of a boy who once reached his school late. And it was a rainy day, and there was a lot of mud and mire on the road. So he reached late by about an hour or so. The teacher became very angry with him and asked for an explanation. He said, "Sir, you know what happened? The route was so bad, full of mud, and it was slippery and difficult to walk, that in reality, when I took one step towards the school, I ended up 2 steps behind. So instead of making a forward motion, actually I was moving backwards." This is the concept of Maududi Sahib, trying to understand mutashabihat, as if you are walking through the same road as it was traversed by that boy, and that instead of leading him to the school, at every step it was pushing him backwards. But the reaction of that boy was much more intelligent than that of Maududi Sahib. when asked to explain, then how did he reach the school ultimately? He said, I turned my face towards my house and turned my back towards the school. So such a scholar should turn his back to the Holy Quran. That is what he deserves. Nothing more. Actually, it is turning his back to the Holy Quran. So this is Kitab. Now we turn to a tradition of the Holy Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, regarding this subject, and then the picture will evolve so clearly and beautifully before us of what is being discussed in this verse. وفي رواية أخرى, I'll read the first one, it's longish. لا تجادلوا بالقرآن فإنما ضل من كان قبلكم بجدالهم إن القرآن لم ينزل ليكذب بعضه بعضا ولكن نزل ليصدق بعضه بعضا فما كان من محكمه فعملوا به وما كان من متشابهه فآمنوا به. In another verse, which is related to the same subject and related from Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiyallahu anha in Tirmidhi, the first verse, the tradition which I have taken is from Durr Mansoor with Tafsir al-Mathur, volume 8, Allama Jalaluddin Suyuti. Now here Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiyallahu anha is quoted as telling us that she once asked Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam the meaning of فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ ابْتِغَاءَ الْفِتْنَةِ وَابْتِغَاءَ تَأْوِيلِهِ. The answer was, when you see those people, when you observe such people, you should recognize them. It's a very interesting answer to a question which apparently is a different question. It's totally a different question from the answer. But when you relate these two traditions, then you begin to understand the meaning of mutashabihat from another window. If a different meaning of mutashabihat emerged before you in the light of these two observations of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the first instance, Rasul Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam was very angry at some companions of the Holy Prophet, some of his companions who were debating some verses of the Holy Quran between them in a manner as if one verse was contradictory to the other. Some of them drew a completely different conclusion from some verses which appeared to be contradictory to the conclusion drawn from some other verses, with the result that the position taken up as if was that the Quran had contradictions. So Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam became very angry with them, and so angry that the whole face flushed, and he told them to abstain from this malpractice, and said that it is impossible for the Quran to oppose itself, to give light to itself. What the Holy Quran does is, yusaddiqu ba'duhu ba'dan, part of it verifies the other part. And the whole Quran is interwoven in this manner that some verses of the Holy Quran will be found supporting some other verses, but never opposing the other verses. So this is how we should ponder over the Holy Quran, and this is how we should understand the design of this great book. Now, when you refer, first let me settle this part. When you refer back to the original verse, which is under discussion, it should be read in the light of musaddiqan lima baina yadayhi, and a completely different meaning of baina yadayhi evolves before us. Baina yadayhi, as I told you, does not refer to the earlier teachings but to the present, what it presents itself. So musaddiqan lima baina yadayhi means there is no contradiction within the Holy Quran. It verifies and authenticates its own verses in a manner that one verse is supporting the other and the other is supporting the first, and so on and so forth. So this is the first time that I read this meaning in that tradition of the Holy Prophet. Before that I had never thought of such a thing, and this is why we should pay very special attention to apparently, casual remarks of Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They're so rich in meaning, and they're always deeply rooted in the verses of the Holy Quran. So this was one meaning of Musaddiqul lima baina yadayhi, which was revealed to me by this tradition. And another aspect becomes clear from the last part. فَمَا كَانَ مِن مُحْكَمِهِ فَعْمَلُوا بِهِ وَمَا كَانَ مِن مُتَشَابِهِهِ فَآمِنُوا بِهِ. Whatever of the Holy Quran is muhkam, you must act upon it. That means that muhkamat of the Holy Quran are those essential verses of the Holy Quran which are fundamental to your making, do's and do nots. The entire structure of man, the basic fundamental structure of man is divided into various parts like bones, like muscles, like nerves, and they all have some do's and do nots about it. Some are created to prevent some things, and some parts are created to abet certain things or help and promote some functions. This is how the entire anatomy of man is studied by the scientists. In the movement of this elbow, there are two types of bones involved, some to facilitate this forward movement and some to stop that backward movement too far. And similarly, in the muscles here, in the forearm and above in the shoulders surrounding this part of the body, you will find two types of muscles. Some who help this movement of contraction, and some which are different cells or different muscles altogether, which help extension backwards to the same position. So similarly, the Holy Quran is divided into two parts in muhkamat, those which say that do this and do that and do that and do that, and those which say do not and do not and do not and do not. So they are very clear. There is absolutely no question of getting the message. And because they all pertain to the practice in life, they belong to the fundamentals, how a true believer is born out of a teaching, that is spiritually born. So they belong to the anatomy of man. But there are other verses which add luster and color and beauty to the skin, and odor or lack of it, and refinement, and cells of taste and touch and so on. which are refined, and hearing, which are refined to a degree that even if they were not refined to that degree, they would have sufficed for the survival of species. But much more than the basic essential is provided to man in the form of these extra things. Now, fundamentals are shared by every man. No man is complete without sharing the fundamentals of the Homo sapiens species of mankind. But the mutashabihat, that is the beautifying portions, are not exactly shared and similarly shared by all, though apparently they are similar. So the Holy Quran refers to the lawn, alwan and alsina, as belonging to this realm. It says, why don't you ponder over this, how we make you similar and also dissimilar in your colors, in your skins, in your appearances, in your tongues, and so on and so forth. And there is such a beauty in that. So Asan al-Hadith belongs to those parts which are not essential and fundamental in the making of a being, but which are so essential for beautification of existence. So a man could be so ugly that it would be horrifying to look at him. Yet, if you count the basic essentials of man, anatomically speaking, you'll find every part in order. He could even be healthier than more beautiful looking people. So what happens in the uterus is that two types of progresses take place simultaneously. Although in the beginning only the essential parts are created, but the Holy Quran tells us, then why don't you observe that we envelop them with softer tissues? And the result is that that embryo, which appears to be so horrifying in its basic suprastructure, when it is given birth, going through the process of yusawwirukum, it becomes so beautiful. So Aminu here refers to those verses of the Holy Quran which, if you believe in, even if you don't understand them perfectly, that faith in them will add beauty to your spiritual being. And they are essential for you. That is to say, you can't survive without them. You have to believe in them, and by believing in them, your spiritual shape is, your spiritual figure is further beautified. But if you ignore the do's and do nots which are referred to by the Prophet as muhkamat, then you are not mu'min at all. According to the very first definition of a believer, you lose one or two or more of the fundamental features of your species, that is, believers. Now, those things in which you believe may also pertain to the future events which have been mentioned in the Holy Quran. And without belief in them, your spiritual life cannot be perfect. For instance, to believe in the resurrection and in answerability, in accountability, is a must according to Muhammad in those verses which speak of the future. You must believe. Why must you believe if you can't act? But you can't act on the verses which relate to the ultimate accountability of mankind, man as such. How can you act upon them? You only prepare yourself for that ultimate future where you will appear answerable to God for your actions. So those verses which pertain to the future have a positive operation on your life, on your existence here in the present. And many verses which are referred to as mutashabihat pertain to the prophecies about the future. And the second tradition which I have quoted has solved this for me, in which Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiyallahu ta'ala anha asked Hazrat sallallahu alayhi wa sallam about those people who have crooked hearts, who have crookedness in their hearts. She asked, what does this verse mean, referring to some people who have crooked hearts? فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ. So they follow whatever is of the Holy Quran is mutashabih. Hazrat sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not explain this verse as was desired by Hazrat Aisha, but he explained it in a different manner and threw a different light on mutashabihat, which is pertinent to the question I am discussing. He answered that when you see such people, you recognize them. Now, there was a prophecy in this answer too. And also it explained that these verses refer to the future messages contained in some verses. There are certain prophecies in the Holy Quran which are differently understood by different people. Rightly by those who are right-minded and crookedly by those who are crookedly minded. And when the times come, their behavior is accordingly crooked. So he prophesies there and then that Aisha, you would live long enough to observe this process, to observe these verses coming into operation, and you will see some people who are crooked, who are referred to in these verses. So pehchan lena, that is to say recognize them, was a warning to her. You will live long enough to see these differences of opinion, Muslims fighting with each other, basing their fights on the Holy Quran. While they will be the people who are referred to in this verse, that because they are crooked, some of them, because they are crooked, so they are turning the Holy Quran into a crooked book. So when you see them, be warned, recognize them and don't behave like them. That is the message given in this. So that was the style of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A beautiful prophet he was. Oh, how wonderful. He contained all the beauty of the Holy Quran in the living form of himself. And unfortunately, his sayings are treated with little respect or scant respect by some of his own followers. And instead of reaching the very pith of the teachings of the Holy Quran through the windows of Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam's observations and remarks, they begin to fight with each other on the basis of those verses, those traditions, and turn them into mutashabihat, which are muhkamat. So muhkamat and mutashabihat are two aspects of the Holy Quran and also two aspects of the sayings of the Holy Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him. You sometimes, two aspects of the same verses, and also two aspects of various verses, different verses. So it should be understood on this in this larger sense, that there are verses which are muhkamat and verses which are mutashabihat, and all the verses from some angles become muhkamat and all the verses from some other angles become mutashabihat, and those verses which pertain to the future remain mutashabihat as long as they do not they are not fulfilled. And when they are fulfilled, when things mentioned therein come to pass, then those verses become muhkamat. So there is a constant, motion within the world of the Holy Quran, waves after waves traveling into each other's regions. For some muhkamat turn into mutashabihat. For some mutashabihat are turning into muhkamat. There are certain times when verses are mutashabihat, but in the future they are going to become muhkamat. Yet for some people who are zagh within them, who are crooked within them, instead of they are turning into muhkamat, even after they are realized, even if they have been translated into a reality of life, still they remain mutashabihat and they go on fighting and picking up fights between themselves. So look at the prophecies, for instance, about the appearance of Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ, and look at the prophecy particularly about the witnesses of the sun and the moon and their eclipses and so on. When it came to pass, that prophecy, appeared so clearly, as if you are observing directly the sun and the moon, because you were observing the sun and the moon, of course. And they showed all those signs which were mentioned in that prophecy so clearly that even the most confused should have seen that these prophecies have come to pass. Yet, there are millions and millions of Muslims who don't believe that they did actually, they were actually realized and they were fulfilled, because they have attached to those prophecies a crooked meaning. I mean, they have attributed their own crookedness to the prophecies, so they want them to be fulfilled in a very special manner. And all such people who are crooked within, they never understand the messages of the prophecies, so for them they remain mutashabihat. Look at the Jews. There were clear prophecies in the Bible about the coming of the Holy Prophet, about the coming of Jesus Christ, peace be upon him. But when he came, they failed to recognize him. Although those mutashabihat had become turned into muhkamat, when they were fulfilled ultimately. So the Christians repeated the same most unfortunate mistake vis-a-vis the parents and recognition of Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The prophecies were there and still are there, but they failed to recognize because they wanted them to be fulfilled in their own manner, as they wanted, as they wished. Ibtagha fitnate wa ibtagha tawile. That is the subject being discussed. And then look at the Muslims of the present time, most unfortunately. Second time the Messiah came, and they did not draw their lessons from the first appearance and the mistakes of those who were expected to believe in the earlier Messiah, in the first Messiah, through the aid of those prophecies. The same mistakes were committed again in exactly the same manner, like the coming of Elijah from the heavens bodily, and like their demand from Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ to descend from the heaven bodily if he wants to be accepted, otherwise he would be rejected, and so on.